Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris, and welcome back to the studio, John Daigle, Ian Hurwitz. Gentlemen, how are you?
Great day to be great, Josh.
You always say that.
The whole family's here.
The whole family is here. Does that mean certain days are not more great than others? They're all great?
All great. You have the opportunity to be great every day. Now, it might not always be a great day, but
The potential in the ceiling is always there?
that's what I'm saying.
Speaking of potential in the ceiling, I just got back from Indianapolis, Scouting Combine. Any questions you guys have of that week that you want to ask me now, since we really haven't talked about it here in front of each other?
How is St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail that every reporter seems to take a terrible photo of?
Yeah, don't tell all my friends in the media this, but it's so overrated.
Really?
No, it's just a vessel for as much horseradish as they can fit into as a sauce as possible.
I do like
it's not appealing. You know, you don't eat it because, oh, this is good, and they don't deliver it as this is good. This is what we're known for, and so we want you to take a photo of it and post it online.
The shrimp cocktail and the steak is what everyone seems to
Yes.
order when you eat in Indianapolis. They don't serve any other food.
And I would even say, not to be, a little brat here, but ordering steaks out at restaurants is something that I'm not really into.
What? Come on.
You're onto something here.
Right.
Because
No.
everyone does a steak.
I would
You're onto something.
I would much rather pay $25 at a nice butcher, get a steak there and take it home and make it than spend $57 at a restaurant. But thank you, NBC Sports, for paying for those steaks. So I appreciate that.
There's something. Well, he's onto something, though.
Yeah.
I swear to you, because at some point, like a bottle of wine, there's a threshold for price.
Yes.
We're like, you're not paying for like a finer cut of meat. It's all the same fine cuts of meat.
How do you feel about spending 3 months a year on combine and prospects only for draft position to really matter more than all that?
I like to have my own evaluations, though. And I will say this, I think the most beneficial part of being at the Combine is just seeing all your friends in the media that you talk to on
rubbing
Twitter.
some elbows
Rubbing
with
some
some
elbows,
dudes.
hearing some things that
Okay.
maybe I won't explicitly say, hey, I heard this, but you'll hear it along the next few months of things I allude to.
Next few months, next
Yes.
50 minutes, we're
I
going to
will-
hear some things.
I will say the lowest point of my week was watching every single episode of Love is Blind on the way to the Combine on the airplane and on the way back. That was a low point. I am self-admitting that. It was one of those, in high school when you have to take a test and cover your notes. I was like that in an airplane next to the woman next to me because I didn't want her to see what I was watching. It's an awful show. Do not watch it. I did for you, so you don't have to.
All I want is for Josh to admit he knew Tyler Ervin was going to go off in the divisional round, and you had an insider.
Might have seen that person at Indianapolis.
There we go.
All right, this website that we work for in Rotoworld is known for their blurb, so why don't we start off with the news of the week? And we started off with the Football Twitter Investigation Bureau having their fair amount of fun with this clip.
Congratulations and thank you to your family and friends coming to celebrate your incredible contributions. Best wishes to all of you.
That was a little FaceTime action of Mike Vrabel being on the phone with Tom Brady and Julian Edelman. That's kind of like the second half to this. The first half was Julian Edelman saying to the camera, he's back. And then, Tom Brady saying something to the effect of, no, he's not. But then isolating the audio actually says a conversation he had with Jim Boeheim, and it has nothing to do with the team that he's going to. This was a fun little moment that Twitter had.
Of course.
John Daigle, what was your interpretation of it?
One, I can't believe adults FaceTime with anyone other than their partners. I don't FaceTime anyone. So
No.
that's just
Doesn't it
not,
feel weird?
That's not my life. That's not my realm at all. Having said that, a lot of reporters and cohorts in the media are doing their jobs. They're passing along intel they receive. But I'm still of the belief that while this is fun, none of it matters at all. Like the CBA gets ratified, then and only then Belichick and Kraft will reach out to Brady, and from then we can start talking about it.
Brady knows exactly what he's doing. He had the whole Super Bowl commercial thing where he tweeted out kind of the weird picture before, and then it led to this. Yeah, they're not talking until the CBA gets done. So what is Brady doing in the meantime? He's trying to drum up as much interest as possible so he can get paid. But I'm still with Daigle, as he said months ago, when he's tired of hearing about these other potential spots, Brady's going to be back in New England.
We actually had Tom Curran on this show back during Super Bowl week. John Doe, you know that because you're on set with us. Let's remind everyone what Tom Curran said at the time, because I think it still applies to right now. Whose decision is it going to be to bring Tom Brady back or not? Bill Belichick's or Robert Kraft's?
Bill Belichick's.
Why?
Because the Patriots have done, Kraft has done everything contractually possible to satisfy making sure that Tom Brady retired a Patriot. Now, the reason they're going year to year, I believe, is because for the good of the franchise, Belichick has gotten to the point where he's convinced Robert Kraft, look, we're going to go year to year as long as we can because we're not committing to a 41, 42-year-old quarterback. And that's where really the schism begins, is Brady's like, look, just because I was born in 1977 doesn't mean I'm 41 or 42. I'm not playing like that. I love the commitment to me that I've expressed I'm desiring, and you're not making it. Robert Kraft, and if you noticed this past offseason, Brady kind of sent a few missives towards Kraft saying, ask Mr. Kraft about that. And the reason being, he knows that Kraft can fix it in a second. Why hasn't Kraft done that? Because he doesn't want to overstep bounds.
It's obviously Tom Curran of NBC Sports Boston. I doubt what he just said has changed, that it is still Bill Belichick's call. I also want to point you, though, to a recent article that Curran wrote saying that the Patriots do want Tom Brady back. So I feel like we talk about this situation every single episode, but it really is the face of the offseason at this moment. I do wonder if it's to the point right now where it's like a he said, she said, like, and there's not enough communication going on right now between the Patriots. And all that it's going to take is one conversation that Bill Belichick has with Tom Brady, and once that happens, we get the firm answer of yes, he's coming back, or no, he's not.
Doug Kyed, Jeff Howe, a lot of people in the Boston media do tremendous work. But that man right there is the one I listen to as it pertains to the Patriots.
I agree.
Because he's linked directly to everyone that matters. And as you said, even in his column, he wrote that the pitch will be, hey, do you want to basically be in this organization, or do you want to go jack around with all these other donkeys doing things that you don't want to be a part of in football? And I think that alone, once they finally talk, is a selling point.
That's the part we don't talk enough about, Ian. Like, if Brady goes somewhere else, and I think we can make this connection to what Peyton Manning did when leaving the Colts to go to the Broncos. That Broncos team was already really good. Now, he elevated it, obviously, but it was always a great situation with really good defensive players. How many quarterback-needy teams out there are in a very good spot where Tom Brady can go to, make it his team, have the things go and happen how he wants exactly them to happen? I'm not sure that list is very long.
I don't know if there is like a perfect suitor with the right front office, with the ready offensive line, with the good weapons. With that said, like, this New England team last year, low-key, was pretty devoid of weapons, especially at the end of the year. You had Hurt Edelman. We're finding out Mohamed Sanu was playing through a ton of pain. Philip Dorsett was like their only guy that even had speed on the entire offense. With that said, also the offensive line. Like, Brady has never won with his mobility. Like, maybe he's not as fast as he was when he was juking out Brian Urlacher 10 years ago, but definitely not a guy who wins the mobility. And this offensive line, they were 29th in spending on the offensive line last season. They lost their center for the entire year. Isaiah Wynn missed the first 8 games. Like, it's not like Brady is just washed up, just missing wide open receivers throughout the entire season last year. So we'll see where he goes, but I do think that we're going to see New England give him a chance like they did in 07 and 14 after these many drops in his career. Until we see Brady play below average with an above average supporting cast, which, again, I don't think that's a supporting cast that was above average last year, I'm not willing to call him washed.
And I think the decision goes hand in hand. Like, if Brady resigns, and I'm assuming he will, I think that also means the Patriots spend their offseason upgrading their offense.
It's wild, because if there is one team that does fit the model that we talked about that's in a situation to succeed, circling back here, it's the Tennessee Titans. Yet, there hasn't been that many connections there. It seems like they want to bring the band back together. But I think if there is one place that he does go to that's not New England, it is the Titans. Yet, and I'll say this, Jeff Darlington, many others have kind of alluded to the fact that Brady might be on the outs. Like, it would be a surprise for him to go back to New England. We've seen that with Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels is out the door, and he came back in and didn't go to Indianapolis Colts. We saw that with Nick Caserio recently. Like, when the Patriots want something to happen, they make it happen.
And there was that other report that came out of nowhere that apparently wherever Brady goes, even if it's New England, perhaps they bring back Antonio Brown because
This was a report?
Yeah, because Belichick and Brady both, like, that was not their problem. They wanted him there still. But obviously they had to part ways after the whole allegations.
I don't know. It seems a little premature.
I agree.
We're not even sure if the NFL is going to let AB
But
play
it was
anywhere.
an official report.
Yeah.
Let's keep it moving. NBC Sports' Peter King reports the Bucs are, quote, likely to move on from Jameis Winston. This was followed up by ESPN's Jenna Lane, adding that the Bucs have had, quote, a level of frustration with Winston's turnovers, and Coach Bruce Arians is, quote, adamant about exploring other options. Not surprising, the dude threw 30 interceptions to go along with 30 touchdown passes last year.
And Bruce Arians came out and said only 20 of the interceptions were Jameis's fault after reviewing the film. I will say, we all mocked kind of the whole LASIK thing, but he was playing through a torn meniscus. He just had surgery on. He had the broken right thumb he played through at the end of the season. I mean, look, I don't know if Jameis is the answer really anywhere, but the guy is a warrior, and I think that was one of the points they made, where it's not the easiest thing to kind of kick him out of Tampa Bay, because he was doing, on the field at least, giving his all, and was feasibly, seemingly a good teammate to everyone.
From everything I've read, it sounds as if they are more than willing to let him test the market because they don't believe he'll have a market.
Yeah, who wants him?
And thus, Arians even said, by the way, that he wants a starter. He doesn't want to hold an open competition, and that's why they're waiting to see if one of those veterans come into play, Tannehill, Brady, Rivers, and then they can decide on Winston if he does not have a market.
Yeah, Jameis is the fallback option at this point. Don't you agree? I mean, and the question is, if he doesn't go back to Tampa, who really does want him? The only one I could point to is Oakland, because we talk about it so often.
Las Vegas.
Excuse me, Las Vegas. And I'm going to make that
take
same
me a while to
mistake
get
30 times in the next week. That often when you are frustrated either with your head coach, your general manager, or even your quarterback, you go to the opposite end of the spectrum. And you cannot find a quarterback that is more different than Derek Carr than Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I thought Las Vegas would be the one spot where he could find a suitor. But, we probably, anytime a quarterback really switches teams with the intent to start in free agency, it doesn't turn out well. I mean, there's been 6 guys since 2016 that have kind of had this happen. Osweiler with the Texans, Mike Glennon with the Bears, Cousins with the Vikings, which has been okay, Sam Bradford with the Cardinals, Case Keenum with the Broncos, and Nick Foles with the Jaguars. Teams don't let really good quarterbacks go somewhere else.
That's what's really interesting about free agency, is that I know Brady's the big stone everyone's chasing, but the rest of how the carousel shakes out is still a big deal. Like, there could be swaps, even Tannehill, if the Titans can't get a franchise tag done with Derrick Henry, or if they decide to tag him.
And it seems like the strong link that everyone thought that Phillip Rivers had to the Colts is kind of separating just a little bit, and some other teams might be getting involved as well.
But Jameis is going to be a week 1 starter somewhere. Would you agree with that?
Man, if he leaves the Bucs, I'm not so sure. I understand. In that 30 for 30 season, there were many high points. He also took his team out of multiple losing situations, and winning situations. This isn't like something new with Jameis Winston. This is how he's always played the position. And that's concerning. He just has not developed. Maybe LASIK changes that. Maybe playing on a full meniscus changes that as well. But I understand both sides. I understand the positives, but I also understand the reservations. And that's not really a place you can really be in when going to a new team, I guess.
It just seems odd that he wouldn't start week 1 when all we're talking about is where Andy Dalton's going to start in week 1.
That's true. We'll hit on Andy Dalton a little bit later. Speaking of Andy Dalton, let's go to the Bengals. Per Jeremy Fowler, the Bengals currently plan to franchise tag wide receiver A.J. Green, as they want him in Cincinnati in 2020, either through the tag or a longer deal. John Daigle, what would you do, or what would you think if you're A.J. Green? Because this is a player who obviously sat out all of 2019, yet he's not one of these wide receivers that goes out into the public, makes his business known to the public. He's very quiet. I'm not so sure at this point, at age 31 or 32,
30, yeah.
I would want to be a member of the Bengals roster.
He's quiet, but yet this entire offseason he's been vocal about this situation. He said he doesn't want to be tagged, on record of not wanting to be tagged. And then he said if he is tagged, he's not only going to hold out for all of OTAs, but probably for most, if not all, of training camp. He has said all of these things on record and vocalized his frustrated opinions, especially after they extended Tyler Boyd in January for $43 million. While trying to get a long-term deal done with him. It's an organization that we know is very capable of screwing these situations up, and it seems like that's all they've done with A.J. Green.
They haven't handled the situation well at all,
yeah.
Clearly. But look, A.J. Green, he missed 6 games in 2016, 17 was fine, missed 7 games in 2018, obviously didn't play at all last year. How much of that was due to the injury? How much of that was due to him just not wanting to play? We don't know, but he's going to be 32 in July. I don't know if they should be putting a large percentage of their cap behind A.J. Green for long term. They already have Tyler Boyd. Joe Mixon's doing his thing in the backfield. John Ross, even Auden Tate. There are options in this offense for a young Joe Burrow with or without A.J. Green.
The only side of that is if the Bengals let one of their quote-unquote superstars go, they have a very difficult time luring other superstars to their roster.
That's fair.
And they don't have that many right now on their roster that they can pay. And I'm with you, though. I kind of want A.J. Green to have his, I don't know, Emmanuel Sanders moment.
Sure.
Where he goes to another team. He's not this alpha receiver. He's kind of a secondary piece. But yet they still greatly benefit from him being on the roster, and he can go deep in the playoffs.
No matter what happens, I'll always look back at the trade deadline and the fact the Bengals didn't even shop A.J. Green, like they weren't listening to anything. That to me is the most outlandish part.
We did hear that Joe Burrow mentioned that he wants A.J. Green on this team. There's been so much talk in this narrative that, the Bengals are pitching Joe Burrow on being the #1 pick. I don't buy any of that. But it was interesting that Burrow almost went out of his way. He was asked about, but went out of his way to mention A.J. Green and how he wants him on the roster. So if we see, we'll see if that adds up. Get an offensive line, though, Joe Burrow. Maybe talk about that.
Jonah Williams comes back.
That's one player.
Helps out a little
Literally
bit.
one player on that offensive line. Per Connor Hughes of The Athletic, 22 teams have made calls to express interest in James Bradberry. James Bradberry, I'm not going to call him an underground superstar here, Ian Hartitz, but he has to face off against Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, whoever in the NFC South 6 times a year. And while the raw numbers that he gives up might not be great, he is still, again, facing very good competition. And he's most likely looking for $15 million a year right now.
Yeah, and he kind of bucked the system in that Ron Rivera defense. I mean, I think we remember when Josh Norman was so good, it kind of took them a lot to even allow him to travel with #1 wide receivers. But Bradberry's been doing that for pretty much the last 4 years. And like you said, he's doing it against some of the best wide receivers the entire league has to offer. So, yeah, even if he's not shutting these guys down, I mean, pull up Mike Evans' stats against them week in, week out. It's taking a lot of targets to get much done because he is a bigger bodied cornerback that can actually stay with some of these better athletes. He's going to be 27 in August. I mean, I'd be down to pay him over Byron Jones, I think, because we have seen. Well, look, I mean, Byron Jones, and it's a conversation for another day. Who's more valuable, the cornerback that sticks on their side of the field like Richard Sherman and just eliminates that side, or the guy who travels around with a #1 receiver and doesn't even need safety help. So I'm not sure if Byron can travel around with #1 receivers. He's got the athletic profile to do it, but he hasn't been asked to do it. Bradberry has, and for that reason, I'd rather have him.
Matt Rule's Panthers and this entire organizational rebuild is filled with shadow comments, and I've just been confused. So I personally tuned into 102.5 Carolina FM this morning to listen to Josh Norris, Panthers insider,
I was on there.
on the radio, and I just don't know, if you're not holding on to a young James Bradberry, and then perhaps you're kicking the tires on even Christian McCaffrey, who could hold out like a Zeke-like holdout. I don't know who their cornerstones are. I don't know who they're even trying to hold on to right now.
And again, it's not like James Bradberry is this household name. But if you want to build a winning team, this isn't the type of player you let out your door. And in fact, it's shame on the Panthers for not getting a deal done with him a year ago at this time, right? He was the perfect candidate to get a contract done a year before he hit free agency. That obviously did not happen. This Panthers organization, we'll hit in a bit more later, and we had a great conversation with Jonathan Jones at the Combine. They don't know what they're doing right now. And I think if they do go into free agency, all their free agent signings are going to be 26 years old or younger. But one, they're going to get priced out of top names, and they don't want to purchase top names. I guess the point here is this, that Bradberry's 25 or 26?
He'll be 27 in August.
27 in August, wow. And in 3 years, when you hope that they're good, then he's 30 years old, and maybe that's. But I don't know if you can really plan football that way. You can't let good players leave your football team, period.
And that's the argument you were saying about A.J. Green, too. And I agree with you. With that said, you look at some of these top cornerback contracts right now. I mean, Xavier Howard's #1 highest paid. Tremaine Johnson's #2. That's a disaster. Xavier Rhodes is #3. That looked really nice until it suddenly didn't. Bradberry does kind of fit that bigger body mold. I do worry a little about how he will age.
It certainly sounds like the Panthers want him back, but Jordan Rodriguez of The Athletic and Panthers Beat mentioned that they just don't want to give him that $15 million a year. So it's more money than the player.
And the market also includes Chris Harris. It's just it's a corner market.
It is. Jacksonville Jaguars are back in the news. Yannick Ngakoue is sick of Jacksonville. Here's his tweet on social media. I don't know if you put it on Instagram too. I'll read it out to you. The Jaguars are aware I no longer have interest in signing a long-term contract in Jacksonville. Duval, I love you and gave you guys everything I got. I'm thankful for the journey and look forward to continuing my career career elsewhere and signed it off with 91. This is a player. And by the way, the news came out immediately afterwards, like within 3 minutes, that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to franchise tag Yannick Ngakoue. So while Yannick doesn't want to be there, Jacksonville doesn't want to not get anything in return for Ngakoue's services.
So I'm assuming we're looking at a tag and trade scenario for him?
D Ford, very similar situation probably as last year.
And obviously only 25 years old? 24. 25 when the season starts, I believe?
And one of the best young edge rushers in the NFL.
Exactly. So there will absolutely be a large market for him as well.
Yeah, I didn't realize just how good he was.
He's amazing.
He's amazing.
Only Chandler Jones, Khalil Mack, and TJ Watt have more forced fumbles since Yannick came into the league. He's perennial, top of his position in pressures. I mean, even if the sack numbers aren't ridiculous, he's creating turnovers and he's getting consistent pressure, and he's still young enough. This is the guy that teams should be lining up to pay.
Do you know what the first 3 picks of the 2016 NFL draft were for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Jalen Ramsey, Miles Jack, and Yannick Ngakoue. That should have been the foundation of the team's defense for years and years and years to come. And this is why we always talk about the importance of ownership, because I truly believe it has trickled down from the top here that they didn't create an environment that their top players want to be in. We just saw it last year. A team should never trade away Jalen Ramsey, right? But he just didn't. He refused to play there.
It's honestly like the Family Guy meme I've just seen floating around where it's like, you can have Jalen Ramsey, you can have a boat, or you can have what's in the box, which is a draft pick. Now, maybe it'll be a boat, maybe it'll be Jalen Ramsey, or maybe it won't. You already have the boat. Keep Jalen Ramsey, keep these great players.
And I think it's a little even deeper than that, because this isn't a situation where we're trading a player who wants to be here for something that we don't know. It's also just creating, again, that infrastructure, that environment that players detest. That it's not a winning culture right now. I mean, I keep saying it every single month, but the plan is not to win in Jacksonville right now, and it hasn't been for a couple of years now.
Which is why it was terrible, because not only did they create that environment, they made sure they sustained that environment by bringing back Barone and Caldwell this offseason.
It's, I mean, dealing this type of player, and I think D Ford got a second-round pick, and he ended up only playing about 40% of the snaps for the 49ers last year. A very good role player. Yannick Ngakoue is a full-time player, and they obviously drafted Josh Allen, who was a very good first-round pick last season. They just didn't even know how to put both on the field at the same time often enough. And if you can't get to that level of coaching, I don't know how you can't sit back. Look, I'm not a coach. I sit here and talk to you guys at this desk. But how can you not even figure out ways to get your 2 best pass rushers in the lineup at the same time?
And I don't know how they expect to succeed. This is a player that arguably could make more money on an open market more than Jadeveon Clowney
I agree.
at the same time. So I don't know if you can't succeed with that type of player. I don't know who you're trying to succeed with.
Yeah, and he'll get a new contract wherever he goes, but it's also going to come with the price of probably a first-round pick.
Well, they got this $88 million problem with Foles, and if they could
elephant in the
find
room,
someone to get rid of it and build around Minshew while he's still on this rookie contract, maybe they could somewhat be a contender, but as the way it is, I don't see how.
Do you hear that, John Daigle? Do you feel that? Ian Hartitz? The trade winds are circling. Yes, a lot of names since NFL Combine Week have been mentioned as possibly being traded. Why don't we run through a few of those and get quickly your 2 cents on each? Why don't we do that? Trent Williams is still in the news via JP Finley. The money Trent Williams wants is astronomical. The dollar figure I heard from someone I know and trust is so outrageous that I'm not even going to say it publicly because I think it will incite a riot. We mentioned that Trent Williams and Ron Rivera have had a conversation. It doesn't seem like the relationship is the issue anymore. It's the money that's the issue now.
So a team, do you think, will offer a first or second?
I think it might have to be a first. I bet a few teams will offer a second.
Okay.
Well, why not pay this guy? Only the Ravens, Broncos, and Dolphins have fewer dollars spending on their offense right now. You have a long-term left tackle that has played as one of the league's very best players at his position.
A position that's so hard to come by.
For almost a decade. Yeah. He's willing to go back to your team that pretty much screwed him over by most accounts and most medical accounts. And why not pay this guy? Who are you going to pay if it's not Trent Williams?
Darius Slay is also back in the trade winds. This is from GM Bob Quinn. We're trying to explore a trade. How often do you hear that? That's not saying we are definitely trading him. We've had some conversations with other teams. Nothing to report right now. We're very much in an information gathering phase of this.
I mean, what? They're going to trade Slay, draft Okudah, and hope he's as good as Slay?
That's what I don't get of this equation
That
at all.
seems to be what they're going to do.
Like, Slay is awesome. Him, Stephon Gilmore, and recently Jalen Ramsey are the only shadow cornerbacks that actually travel in the slot. Like, he is so good. I know Keenan Allen had a little bit of success. Devontae Adams has success over the years. But, like, it takes a top of the league, elite wide receiver 1 to beat Slay, and he doesn't need any help doing it. So, again, this guy, pay him.
The hang-up, it seems, is that he genuinely won't settle for anything less than being the highest-paid corner in the league, and that's the issue here.
Yeah, and this goes back to Ngakoue, too. It seems to come down to two things, right? Down to money, most importantly, but also winning. Like, the Jaguars are not a winning franchise, and the Lions are not a winning franchise, and right now it doesn't seem like anyone's going to turn around super quickly. You mentioned Andy Dalton earlier in the show. This is from Paul Darner. The Bears have, quote, been in touch with the Bengals about acquiring Andy Dalton. Ian Rappaport also mentioned the Patriots if they move on from Tom Brady as well. Who knew that in 2020, this offseason, that Andy Dalton would be a hot commodity?
I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. I was saying on Twitter, like, if Andy Dalton is the answer, like, I don't want to know the question. At what point do we think Andy Dalton can, like, lead? The Bears, I think, are a pretty complete team. If they had better play at quarterback last year, they definitely could have made the playoffs. But I don't think Dalton's necessarily an upgrade over Trubisky at this point. He's always been a sum of his parts quarterback. When they had A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, all these weapons around him, he's still topped out as a first-round loss QB. So I don't see this being a priority for anyone. I don't think it should be.
I don't know, because I think the Bears are a team that are actually set to compete with a quarterback that at least just doesn't turn the ball over like Trubisky does with his poor decision-making. Either way, any team that acquires him, it's clear they're not acquiring him to be a backup. Andy Dalton's starting somewhere in 2020.
And this is a benefit to the Bengals, too. Like, Andy Dalton has enough of a market right now that he's going to be acquired via a trade and not just cut out and be a free agent. So kudos to the Bengals for, I mean, they're getting something for,
doing something
I'm not
right,
saying for nothing, but getting something out of Andy Dalton that I think many of us a year ago wouldn't have expected.
QBR is not a perfect stat, but it's a pretty good one. Trubisky was 29th, Dalton was 31st. Like, there's not a big gap between these guys last year, at least.
Hayden Hurst might also be on the move via Jeff Howe. It's possible the Ravens will move tight end Hayden Hurst, assuming they can get acceptable value in return for the 2018 first-round pick. New England has not called the Ravens about Hurst, despite one report saying otherwise. If you all remember, Hayden Hurst was that first-round pick above Lamar Jackson in the same round of that draft. Go ahead.
And I was saying, and Hayden Hurst was supposed to be the receiving threat tight end over Mark Andrews, and then we see how that's turned out now, 2 years in their career.
And I mean, I think the big issue is they signed Nick Boyle to the bigger contract last offseason because Andrews spends 60% plus of his snaps as a slot receiver, and they just still call him a tight end. So I think there's a world where Hurst and Andrews could coexist, but with Boyle there, it kind of ruins it.
Well, and even though two tight ends might be above him on the depth chart, they still use three tight ends often. Like, they'll put three tight ends on the field, and if you're in a smaller package, they'll bunch in and run all over you. And if you're in a larger package, then they will spread you out and throw the football all over you. I'm not saying Hayden Hurst is nearly as good as Mark Andrews, right?
No, but
he's a beneficial player.
And they're not paying him much right now. He's still on his rookie contract, so unless they're getting a day one pick, which who knows, I don't see any reason to really rush this.
Trade winds are still circling, so let's keep going. Derek Carr, this comes via Vic to 4. The Raiders are not shopping Derek Carr. They have placed him in the window with a pretty display. I think a second-round pick gets it done. The most likely scenario is still that Carr makes the move to Las Vegas. John Dago, if you ran an NFL franchise, would you throw a second-round pick in Derek Carr's way?
No, and this is the one. You mentioned Jameis Winston perhaps not starting next year. Derek Carr's the one. If Oakland finds someone else, Derek Carr just ends up being cut. They save $13.6 million by releasing him, and then Derek Carr probably ends up as his backup, or at best case scenario for him, competing for a starting job.
I mean, Carr was as good as he has ever been last season. They had the league's highest paid offensive line. I think more than enough good receivers, honestly, with Tyrell Williams, Renfrow, Waller. Like, there were weapons on that offense. They were 7-9, 24th in points per game. Even they were 9th in yards per play. I mean, I don't know. I was kind of impressed with what Gruden brought to the table, like, schematically. They usually did very well in their first, scripted drive of the game or two. But I just think we've already seen the best of Carr in, now Las Vegas, and I just don't think it's the answer.
It all goes back to this with Derek Carr, and we just saw the Super Bowl winning quarterback went off script. We heard that term off script all combine long with someone like Jordan Love's name, and obviously Joe Burrow and Tua and so on and so forth. Derek Carr is the opposite of off script. He has to be reading page to page exactly what he's going to do. And if not, he's going to dunk it down to Jalen Richard and give you about 3 or 4 yards in those instances.
And we talked about it, similar to Garoppolo, similar to Goff, where if you can build everything around him and get guys open, sure, he can do it. But when all of a sudden you're not paying them a rookie contract, it's a lot harder to make everything perfect around him.
Trey Turner, possibly on the move, per Jenna Lane. The Panthers have put out feelers. I'll say this, and we don't have to go long on this one. If Trey Turner is traded, that would kind of be the first real indication that the Panthers are kind of doing their Dolphins-like move, because Trey Turner is one of the best guards in the NFL, not costing this team like way too much money, only going to be 26 years old, and you don't get your quarterback coming off injury. You don't make the offensive line worse for him coming off that multiple issues of the shoulder and foot if you aren't trying to lose next year.
He bounced back from a serious injury last year. Like you said, still young. So he's obviously someone that teams are going to be highly interested in if they do dangle him.
So Josh, if Turner is available, who isn't available on the Panthers?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I think that you can't touch this list is Shaq Thompson because he just got a big contract. Brian Burns because he was a first-round pick last year. And DJ Moore, and then maybe an erasable pencil, Christian McCaffrey's up there.
Maybe Christian McCaffrey.
But like, if a team goes and throws a first-round pick or 2 first-round picks for Christian McCaffrey, I'm not saying teams would do that, but if that happens, then I bet he's gone. Like Taylor Moton's a very good offensive lineman, their best offensive lineman, and so some people from the outside looking in might say, okay, well the Panthers don't want to deal him. They probably wouldn't, but if a team throws a second-round pick at them, they'd probably take that, right?
I'm just interested to see if we see the Carolina in this offseason just really make it clear that they are in a full-on rebuild mode, or
they don't know what they're doing.
And that's the thing. So I hope we can figure that out.
That's why I wonder the whole Cam Newton, we're moving forward with him news happened at the Combine, if only because, like, right now, that's what they have for plans.
No, they're just stuck with him.
Maybe in 2 weeks, that's a different plan. Unless, like you said, they're stuck with him because perhaps they didn't get many offers.
Or none. They're stuck with him because he can't pass a physical right now. So we're coming up on free agency when all this quarterback news is going to happen. So, like, to me, if he is healthy enough for a trade during draft weekend, maybe he gets dealt in. But I commend the Panthers for, saying that they have this excitement for Cam Newton. But really, this is just a situation that all parties are kind of stuck in right now. And we love Cam. Of
course.
We love Cam. But
always will.
But this isn't a great ship to be on at the moment.
That makes it an intriguing situation for Christian McCaffrey because, as mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, just 2 years out from his contract extension, it's possible to hold out like Zeke did early on. And this doesn't seem like a front office who would be very interested in that.
Well, and when they're good, he might be taking $20 million per year from them because that's probably around the money that he wants as well at that position. Yeah, it's difficult.
If you are McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara, truly can be a number 1, number 2 receiver, it's different, but I'm sure we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
All right, we're going to end the show with a new segment, John Daigle's segment, Feeling the Heat.
Feelin.
The Heat. So no G.
Cranking
just
up
an apostrophe at the end.
Apostrophe.
Feeling the Heat.
Who's feeling the heat?
Well, since it's your segment, why don't you kick us off?
Okay. First we had wins, now we have fire, because I believe the Cowboys' front office is now feeling the heat. It perhaps looked as if they had all their ducks in a row, franchise tag Dak, transitional tag Amari, and at the very least, you have the last say in either outbidding a team for Amari or letting him walk. But now they have a deadline. Unexpectedly, since the new CBA, once it's ratified, all teams have no choice but to only use one tag. And that means that if they can't work out a deal with Dak by March 12th to 18th, I can't remember the exact deadline, then they have no choice but to franchise tag him, and Amari immediately becomes a free agent. And we're not even talking about Byron Jones and all this, who's definitely gone and likely getting the highest money on the market among cornerbacks. So I really think that, given Jerry Jones' age, given what was expected, like this is now unexpected, unfortunately, because this is how this organization does business. They wait until the very last second to get these deals done, and now it seems to be haunting them.
Could they also be feeling the heat because 2019 might have been their best year to win, and 2020
the window,
might go smaller and smaller, the window, I mean.
The window was really Romo to Dez. Like, that was the window in Green Bay. But
shame. Yeah, and the defense right now is just, again, like the defense was the problem last year. The offense is number 1 in the league in yards per play. I know they didn't always come through and they needed to, but like the defense went from very good to borderline below average. Leighton Vander Esch, we're hearing it's going to be okay with his neck thing, but that doesn't seem cleared up as well. They have a massive hole across from DeMarcus Lawrence that I saw. Randy Gregory, once again, applying for reinstation. So, and now they're going to lose Byron Jones. I don't think Chidobe Awuzie is, ready to step up as a true number one cornerback. Whole lot of holes in that defense and not much money to really fill them.
I mean, you mentioned a whole lot of holes. I'm on Our Lads right now looking at their depth chart.
Yeah.
Basically, 75% of their defense is in red, meaning they're about to be free agents.
Jordan Lewis projects as their number one cornerback right now.
And they're always going to be feeling the heat, the Cowboys, because they paid Zeke ahead of both of the other guys, or all three of them, including Byron Jones. I mean, they always will be in that spot. And I think it's notable that Mike McCarthy, during his combine press conference, said that, yes, we would love to have Amari Cooper back, and why wouldn't you? You just have to go watch that game he had against the Minnesota Vikings with Dak, and they were so in sync. And the team recently traded a first-round pick for him. You can't how bad of a look is it to trade a first-round pick, have a guy on your roster for a year and a half, and let him go because you can't come to a money agreement? But more even than giving Amari Cooper praise, Mike McCarthy's up there giving Randall Cobb praise, and I think Michael Gallup was great. I think Randall Cobb had a solid season last year, but those can't be your top options. You have to bring back Randall Cobb somehow, some way.
And
you have to.
And we've seen Dak throughout his career. Awesome as a rookie. Next year with a kind of washed up Dez, his only number one receiver, really regressed. 2018, first 7 weeks before they got Cooper, things were really bad. I mean, he hasn't proven to this point, not saying he can't. I don't know if he can elevate below average receivers, really.
Even so, Jerry Jones compared Dak to Stephen Jones, his own son, saying he's like family, it's on me to just get it done. So it's going to happen, and we're going to see what happens after that.
Ian, who's feeling the heat?
JuJu Smith-Schuster is feeling the heat. He's an unrestricted free agent after this next season. I don't think we know yet if he is a true number one wide receiver. Look, he was crazy good as a rookie, 11.6 yards per target. The next season he goes 111 catches, over 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. A lot of people, were saying, oh, AB's number 2 receiver in his own offense, which was ridiculous. But anyway, last season limps to 7.9 yards per target, was outplayed by James Washington really for most of the year, and Deontay Johnson was even more explosive for stretches. Will he have a big enough bounce back this year to really command wide receiver one money? Because he's still incredibly young. He does everything right in terms of social media, off the field. Really good guy. Definitely someone teams should want to have, in the locker room, just kind of being, a guy that people look to for their team. But again, he's going to need to go off this year because if Roethlisberger gets hurt again or just isn't as effective, I'm not sure how big the market's going to be for him.
The Steelers in general are a wild card. You have 38-year-old Roethlisberger coming off elbow surgery. You have him playing now without Antonio Brown, which we had 2 injury games to watch him do that last year, and that didn't go well. And then, as you said, JuJu, who has never been, or at least never had the opportunity to be the alpha option with concerted coverage his way. We really don't know what this is going to be.
Yeah, it's always that discussion of, does a wide receiver understand who he is, and does that connect with who the team feels he is? Because even if JuJu wants to be this number one true alpha for an NFL team, I think we can all agree that his best position is in the slot. And that's okay. When you're on the NFL field and when you run, 3 wide receiver sets 80-something% of the time, and he's in the area he can win, it doesn't matter where you're throwing the football to or who's getting the production, and JuJu's going to get a lot of it. But when they go to those contracts, I'm sure the Steelers side is going to say, okay, you don't line up in one-on-one situations with the top corner on the outside. You're still giving us production, but you're not Julio Jones. You're not A.J. Green. You're not Odell. You're not so on and so forth. So I do wonder if maybe even we get to August and this contention, this conversation builds up more, because it's not going to right now, because he's not really even on anyone's radar based on the 2019 season.
And if there's any team that could feel good about their chances of getting a viable replacement in the top 3 rounds of their draft at wide receiver, it's the Steelers.
And even in early best ball leagues right now, he's going as the wide receiver 14, so clearly the public even don't have much faith. I will be betting on him higher because I do believe he's a special player, but again, we don't know anything.
If Ben comes back, this is a good situation. They have everyone coming back for agency.
Top 3 defense in the league.
I mean, Ben certainly doesn't look like he's in game shape. Let's put it that way. But this is a really solid roster that they have if everything aligns with the quarterback.
The Steelers, the Steelers and the Bills were the 2 teams, just looking at the whole picture, I was very pleasantly surprised by how complete they are.
Ben at least skipped the tennis ball throwing portion of rehab. He went straight to football, so that's a good sign.
I'll tell you who's feeling the heat. Washington's belief in Dwayne Haskins. It's going to be tested over the next few weeks. The rest of the NFL was not sold on Haskins coming out of college. Ron Rivera, who has obviously implemented an entirely new environment since taking over, was not there when the Haskins decision was made. This is Washington with the number 2 overall pick. It's their Chicago Bears passed on Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes moment, right? We watched Haskins this past season, and from our seat, I don't think he did anything to instill this confidence that you believe that he can be the franchise quarterback. Like when you go and watch Kyler Murray, he did that. When you watch Sam Darnold or Baker or Lamar Jackson during their rookie year, they had that. I didn't get that sense with Haskins. So it's going to be tested, their belief in Dwayne in the next few weeks, because if they fall in love with Tua, if Tua's medicals check out, what is stopping them from selecting Tua at number 2? Nothing should stand in their way from doing that at all.
It's exactly like the Arizona Cardinals situation when they had invested in Josh Rosen, they got a new coach, and then they want a different quarterback. So I could absolutely see it. With that said, I also think it's like Rosen in that how was Haskins really going to succeed in that environment last year? Because the other quarterbacks they put in there didn't do good without a left tackle, with a third round. Not to hate on Terry McLaurin, the guy is awesome. But when a third round receiver is your clear-cut number 1, like the only guy you can consistently get the ball to, that's a problem. Tight ends were hurt all season. I mean, an absolutely atrocious environment for a rookie QB. And yeah, you're right, he didn't show much help with it. But again, I mean, this was a guy who was a 1-year starter in college, and he broke the Big Ten record in his 1 year. It seemed like coming out that this was a situation where we knew it wasn't going to be all that good in the first year, but it's hard to go through these times and not have great results and stay consistent with that.
And Washington did bring in Burrow and Tua at the Combine for visits. I just remain skeptical because Haskins wasn't a Bruce Allen guy. Haskins was a Dan Snyder guy.
Correct.
Who connected his ties playing high school football in Maryland as a local guy. Like, that's why he wanted to bring him in. Chase Young played high school football 25 minutes outside of D.C. So outside of Chase Young just being a spectacular player as well, it just makes all too much sense.
Yeah, obviously the other part of this is you miss out on a Chase Young level talent, and it's not like they have a completely new front office. Like Kyle Smith was director of player personnel last year. I actually found out what Kyle Smith looked like at the NFL Combine because he did a press conference there.
Yeah, before that I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup.
No, it's funny. You see these people like at Shrine Games and Senior Bowls and practices, and like I knew he was a Redskins employee, but I never connected that like, oh, this is AJ Smith's son, and now he's basically in charge of the draft room. He's been in charge of the draft room for a while now. I agree, but it certainly seems like Dan Snyder has bought into Ron Rivera, and if Ron Rivera, they have been delivering a message, and it hasn't been under the radar. Like constantly Ron is talking about, oh, it's great to see Dwayne walking around the building. Oh, it's great to see him in the locker room. It makes you think that the people in that building never saw him last year. At least that's how I read between the lines. Like, again, I understand it's not his fault. I don't think he did many favors.
Right.
I also wonder what they could get for him if they trade him, and I don't think it'd be any more than maybe a third-round pick.
I agree with that, and I know one of the biggest knocks was his intellect, but J.P. Finley said, even sitting with the guy, like he's actually one of the most intelligent players you'll be around.
Should we take it one more turn, Ian? Go ahead.
Curtis Samuel and Josh, we've been longtime members of the Curtis Samuel fan club, but look.
Why wouldn't you be?
Only played 9 games as a rookie, battled some injuries. 2018 he flashed, showed some playmaking ability. Some injuries, Cam got hurt at the end of the year, and then we had 2019, which was the Kyle Allen experience. And so the best stat I found to kind of sum up the Kyle Allen experience is Pro Football Focus. Like they count every deep ball target and they deem if it was catchable or not. 25% of Carolina's deep balls were deemed catchable last season. The Colts were the second worst team at 31%. So there's like a large gap between just how bad Kyle Allen was at throwing deep and everyone else.
And Will Grier.
Yes. And specifically Curtis Samuel. Him and Corey Davis were the only 2 guys among a 73-player sample with under 20% deep ball catchable rate. Like we talk about guys not having a chance to succeed. This is the definition of that. Like there's no one, I don't even know, wide receiver period across the league that was more hyped in training camp. There's, scrimmaging the Bills, making Tre'Davious White look silly, like deep ball after deep ball hitting Curtis Samuel in camp. Didn't come to fruition during the season. All of a sudden, it's his 4th year in the league. Look, he's averaging 9 yards per rush on his career. We saw him line up in the backfield at the end of the year. This guy makes plays when they give him the ball. They weren't able to give him the ball last year. And in this Carolina situation we talked about, like it's not a given that it's going to be a very good offense next year. I'm worried about our guy Curtis.
Interesting. Has this been groupthink, do you think, Daigle, between me and Ian loving him a lot, where we're just missing the point? Like, he's just not as good as we think he is?
No, he's only 23 years old. That's the thing. So there's still tons of time.
Love it.
So a player with high athletic prowess, like, I still buy in because he can still develop. Now, in a couple years, if we're still talking about this, we have an issue. But right now, I think it's just fine to still be angry about his usage.
And it's just going to be cheaper in fantasy drafts for us next year.
There we go.
I mean, I think I got ahead of myself somewhat by saying there was the potential there for Curtis Samuel to have a better year than DJ Moore. I'll raise my hand on that. But also, with a quarterback who actually throw vertical, it wasn't that big of a stretch between them.
The air yards would indicate, if we ran a simulation of last season 1,000 times, Curtis probably would have finished ahead of
And
him.
more than anything, they just do two different things, Like, DJ Moore is great at what he does. It's a lot of slants, it's a lot of drags, it's a lot of yards after the catch. Okay, Curtis Samuel helps a team open up everything underneath. And when he was open one-on-one and had those opportunities, it just didn't happen. Again, who knows what the Panthers are at this moment, but it would be unwise at kind of the lowest value that Curtis Samuel's ever had to potentially move on from him at this time. Yeah. And so it would be difficult for me to see them doing that, especially in this Joe Brady offense.
That's why you mention players they are not going to part with no matter what, and Samuel's not on that list, and I understand that. But like, moving on from him would be the worst decision possible.
It would, but
he's so young.
The reason I didn't include him is because, like, if the team offers him a second-round pick, I bet they take that.
Okay,
I don't know that, but
Probably.
like, he was a second-round pick, and if people think he still has that same value and think that they can unlock him, then yeah, you take that.
I'm curious to see where his ADP ends up, kind of for fantasy purposes, just because, the big miss, at least for me last year, was O.J. Howard, and kind of my thinking why I was so wrong in that was you just got to be careful when you're projecting a guy to be a really good performer and they're probably the number 3 option in their own passing game. And that's what Curtis is looking like next year behind DJ and McCaffrey. So,
John Daigle, want to close this out?
Yeah, because with the new schedule, I think the combine's feeling the heat a little bit.
It was quite cold there. It snowed.
Well, still feeling the heat because workouts moved in a 4-day span from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. as opposed to its previous schedule historically. And it resulted in athletes getting injured due to workout schedules and thus threatening to hold out for next year because of that. It ended up St. Elmo's had to have shrimp stock from 10 to midnight every single night. So I just think that I don't know if it's wise to continue. And if they do continue it, at the very least, it's feeling the heat from everyone from the outside looking in, speaking up about it. You were there, though.
I was.
You know more about
but
this.
I wasn't there during the time of the workouts. Like, I left that Thursday and got back in time. I'll tell you this. The change in the workouts screwed up my work schedule completely because when it was previously from like 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was able to get all the info, all the sheets, all the results by about 7 p.m. that night. And this year, I wasn't able to get any of that. I had to wake up the next day and then record a podcast. And by that time, it's out by noon, and then the workouts start at 4. The workflow was awful. It was awful.
It was probably that way for everyone, every reporter there as well.
Yeah, and people were still up early. Like, the players still got up at 7 and 8, and that means,
They're up.
Scouts and everyone still had to get up at 7 and 8. So I don't know how much change other than putting the workouts on prime time. And it's still, the worst thing about the Combine is how it's displayed. And I don't mean by Daniel Jeremiah and Rich Eisen, they do a great job. I just mean that it's 40s and then position drills, and so that's what people interpret the Combine as when it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I was just watching the XFL. I wasn't too interested in watching a bunch of college dudes run around in their underwear. But hey, some people like it, so.
Just like some people like the XFL, Ian, and some people don't.
There we go.
Let's close it there. Thanks so much, guys. It was so great seeing you. I missed you. I miss being in this
We'll
small
do it
room
again
with
48
you.
hours. So.
Yes, we'll do it again on Thursday. Another episode will be out on Thursday for all of you. We'll have Roto Pat, the king, join us at that time. All right, talk to you all soon. Up the Villa. See ya.